It's Wednesday. You know what that means. Time for the Southern California Writers Association Hump Day Book Tour. I'm your host, Maddie Margarita, here with Diana Pardee on tech. Every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the Southern California Writers Association turns our Facebook group over to a new author to introduce themselves, their work, and share a quick writing tip or two. So take a break, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy as SCWA's Hump Day Book Tour proudly presents Suzanne Redfearn. Hi, Suzanne.
Good morning, Maddie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, on another cool Southern California morning.
Exactly.
More or less.
Yeah.
So before you start out talking about your latest book, I have to ask you, what is Laguna Beach's literary laureate?
Yeah. Laguna is kind of a wonderful place. For those of you that don't live in California or Southern California, Laguna is a little oasis down here. And it started off as an artist colony, and very much the city tries to keep that kind of vitality of being an artist community. And so a couple of years ago, the Arts Commission, we actually have an Arts Commission, decided that they wanted to bring writing into that loop. And so they reached out to me and they said, hey, would you like to advocate for writers and writing and reading and books? And so I signed on, and it was an incredible experience of just meeting and interacting and coming up with ideas of how to get people engaged in not just reading, but also in how to write. And we had all kinds of poet contests. We did an anthology, so everybody's work could get published. We had a ekphrastic challenge where we had an art piece, and then everybody had to write a piece that went with that single art piece, and it was fabulous. Yeah.
How fun. So you find time to do a lot of other things besides writing, but let's talk about your book first. Do you have a copy of it right there?
I do. So my latest book that is out now is called In an Instant, and this is kind of the big seller right now. And this got published it was released for First Reads, which is a special Amazon program, and it was chosen for the First Reads. So that got released on February 1st, and then was released to the public on March 1st. So this has been out for a few months now. And then my latest is coming out in January, and that's Hadley and Grace. It's coming out in January of next year, but actually was just announced that it also was chosen as a First Reads, which is a pretty big deal. So yeah, so I'm very excited about that. So this will release January 1st for $1.99 to non-Prime subscribers and free to Prime subscribers. So it's a pretty big deal. And then to the general public on February 1st.
So what is Hadley and Grace about?
Oh, Hadley and Grace is so exciting. So I was a huge fan of Thelma and Louise growing up. I mean, I don't know why. I just loved that movie. I was right during my kind of like young adult years, and this women empowerment, them going off on this journey and, taking on the world. And so I was kind of in between books, and I was like, okay, I need an idea. And all of you that are writers out there, you never know where inspiration is going to strike. And I had just written a very heavy novel, one that was really gut wrenching and took a long time to write and kind of sucked out my energy. And I thought, I want to write something a little less taxing. So I said, why don't I do a modern retake of Thelma and Louise? What was so interesting is when I actually went to write the story, that movie was made over 20 years ago. And times have changed so much that the misogyny that was so prevalent in that book, which is what they were railing against, really doesn't exist anymore, of the ogres and the men being just jerks and all that kind of stuff. So the book took on its own life in a 20th century version of this, a later version of this. And then I also, because all of my books are usually about family, so I ended up having these two amazing women, Thelma, actually Hadley and Grace, who actually end up with their kids on this incredible road trip where they're on the run from the law, accidental criminals, kind of fumbling over themselves, but also discovering themselves along the way. And it turned out to be a remarkable journey. And one of the best things about it is, again, back to Laguna Beach, obviously very near and dear to my heart. There's a man in Laguna Beach, his name is Skipper Carrillo. And he is called Mr. Baseball. He was born with some intellectual disabilities, and through those, but he has an incredible intelligence. So he's kind of a savant in some ways. So while his IQ is only somewhere around 70, he has an amazing ability to remember facts and figures. So his whole life, he communicated through baseball. So he always wore baseball uniforms everywhere he went. He still does. He's 80 now. And he's loved and he's absolutely beloved in our community. They just did a sculpture to him and to honor him because his spirit is so incredibly bright. His sister wrote a very small autobiography about him. I happened to be reading it as I was writing Hadley and Grace. And the story of him was so incredibly inspiring, of him as a boy, that I decided to use his kind of spirit in one of the characters. And so there's a little boy in Hadley and Grace. His name is Skipper, and he's kind of a tribute to the real Skipper Carrillo. And it's just, it adds such a beautiful layer. And, you know, Skipper has been part of my kid's life because he used to go to all the baseball games at the high school. And he would call out the innings. He'd come out and he'd hold up a sign. He'd go, inning number or bottom of the ninth. And then he'd yell out the score, and then he'd go back in the dugout with all the boys. So my son, who played baseball all his life, has always had Skipper in his life. So to have Skipper in this book has been really kind of remarkable.
So they say, write what you know. So
Yeah.
that is a good example of that. And I think it's things like that, touches like that give your books such a feeling of genuineness and authenticity and heart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you do that? I mean, when you're writing and you sat down and in an instant, like you said, was a very intense story. I mean, Finn and all the, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the
Sure. In an Instant was a gift. So for those of you that are writers out there, and you know, gosh, when inspiration strikes, I swear, grab hold of that tail of that tiger and hold on for dear life and say thank you to the writing gods. So I was actually on a chairlift with my kids. I ski. My kids were younger at the time. This was also something for writers out there. I actually wrote In an Instant over 7 years ago, and it was rejected by my editor at the time. And so it got shelved, and another book got published. And truthfully, I actually wrote another book that was supposed to get published, but because of the political climate, my agent said, we can't publish this book. She goes, send me something else. And I was like, and my daughter, who happened to be sitting there, my daughter's in college, I'm never with her, but she happened to be there at that moment. And I'm like, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. And she says to me, send her that one about the car accident. And I'm like, oh my God, I wrote that so long ago, and it was rejected by my publisher. And she goes, just send it. I really like that book. And so based on that little tiny conversation, I sent In an Instant to my new editor. My new editor loved it, and now it's sold 170,000 copies or some ridiculous amount. It's in 11 countries. So it just goes to show you that the turning point of a book not just literally not existing and then going into the world is that small. It's that finite. But back to how In an Instant came about. At the time, my kids were much younger. We were on the chairlift. I had my son on one side, my daughter on one side, and it was one of those cold, blustery days. And we were up high, and suddenly the weather just got very cold. And a visceral memory, excuse me, let me turn this off. A visceral memory came back to me of when I was 8 years old. I had been with my dad and my uncle back on the East Coast. If you have a very close family friend, you call them uncle or aunt. My uncle's two boys, and then my brother. So it was the two kids, my dad, the two kids, and my uncle. And we all decided to go for a walk in the Adirondacks. It was springtime. For those of you that know upper state New York, the weather can change in an instant, But seriously, you can have a beautiful sunny day, and then suddenly there's a blizzard upon you. And this was before iPhones, this was before weather forecasts and all that kind of stuff. So, we get to the top of this hike, and suddenly a blizzard blows in, and we're not dressed for it. My uncle, who's a dentist, says we can't make it back down the hill in this kind of weather. And there's a small little hunting cabin. It's probably 8 feet by 10 feet. It's just 4 walls. And it's probably 30 some years ago that this memory is from. And I can't remember if he used a rock. I know he had a rock. I remember the rock. I can't remember if he broke a window or a door, but somehow he breaks into this cabin, and there's just a bench. And so my dad very bravely says, I'm going to run down for help. So my dad starts running down the hill, leaving us with my uncle. There's the 4 kids sitting on the bench, and then my uncle. And my uncle is going, his kids are very upset. I'm sitting next to my brother, who's 10, I'm 8. And my brother's very stoic. Even to this day, my brother is very stoic. So he's saying nothing. He's not doing anything. So I'm just doing what my brother's doing. I'm just sitting there next to him, very, very cold. My the two boys of my uncles are complaining and crying. And so my uncle's comforting them. He's going, Uncle Jerry's going to be back. Don't worry, don't worry. And he's taking off their gloves and he's rubbing their fingers. He's going hand, 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 hand. Then he's taking off their boots and he's rubbing their feet, 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 feet. Meanwhile, me and my brother are sitting there. I don't know how long it was. It must have been hours. I mean, it was a long time. And I remember, and this is why the memory came back to me. Cold like that, you don't forget. It actually is so cold, it feels like it's actually going all the way through you, like you actually don't exist anymore. Finally, it must, like I said, hours later, a rescue jeep comes up, takes us down the mountain. There's paramedics waiting. And my brother and I are in the ambulance, and they take off my gloves, and I have what's called frostnip, which means that the surface of my skin had frozen, but it hadn't got any deeper. So it really hurt when they warmed them up, but once my hands were revived, they were fine. Then they moved to my brother, and my brother's, I'm going to tear up because I do this every single time. My brother's gloves had frozen to his hands, and so they had to cut them off, and they were blistered, and he had first-degree frostbite. What's so interesting about this is that nobody ever asked us why my brother and I were injured, and my uncle's two boys weren't. And at the time, I'm 8 years old. I don't know that this is a horrible thing that my uncle's done. I remember him laughing with the reporters. There were reporters there to, report on 4 people found in a mountain, blah, 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 blah. And he's laughing and he's saying how heroic he was and that he had the foresight to break into this cabin. And only when I was on that chairlift some 30 years later, as a mom myself, and that memory comes flooding back to me, do I realize how horrible this was. This man who I thought had loved me, who I had thought had loved my brother, could completely ignore us in a time of, struggle or trial. And that's where the idea came to me. And the idea was literally, how much do you trust someone else to look after your children? Or how much should you trust someone else to look after your children? And I had made the mistake. I mean, I had done it all my life, yeah, letting,
Yeah.
I've lost. Yeah. So that's where the idea came from. And I literally, as soon as I got home, I started writing, and I was just like, just let it pour out, just figure out what you're going to do. And what's interesting is a lot of people have asked me, because the perspective is on the story is told from a dead girl. She dies in an accident, and then she's looking down in the aftermath at her family trying to survive at first, and then how they go on afterwards after the tragedy, and to make sense of the decisions that they made. And a lot of people have asked me, what made you tell it from that perspective? And I can honestly say, I think it was because the idea came to me as I was on a chairlift, looking kind of down on the world, and that it was reflecting back, like I was looking at myself as an 8-year-old. And so this perspective of this omniscient view, I think, came from the fact that the inspiration kind of came when I was in this very strange place and this strange perspective.
So that means, what did you write? I don't want to move on. I mean, that's such an intense story, but we only have a short. We'd love to talk to you more about that, but I want to move on just a little bit to what you wrote before Hadley and Grace. What was the book that?
Oh, yeah. So that book is called Beyond Oceans. Right. Yeah. And, writers, all I can say is, if you want to be an author, write, and just continue to write and continue to write, because you really don't know what the market is ready for or what they want to publish at the time. So the best work I've ever written is the one that I wrote before Hadley and Grace. It's called Beyond Oceans. But unfortunately, in the climate that we're in right now, it's not a book that can be published. It's got too many, it's going to be a PR mess. And, if you know what's going on with American Dirt, you would know why Beyond Oceans can't get published. And I don't want to put myself through that, to be honest with you. As soon as they said that, I was like, you know what, I'm okay. I've got something else here, publish this instead. And so, that's what's going out in the world. So as a writer, as an author who's trying to get published, the more that you have in your arsenal to give agents, to give editors, the more chance you have not only of getting published in the first place, because I'll tell you, Hush Little Baby, which is my very first book, was also not the book that I got represented by. It's also not the book that went to my editor the first time. So, luckily I had another book to give them that they could say, oh, but I really like this. So a lot of times an agent or an editor will say, God, I really like your writing, but right now the market is flooded. Like right now they're telling everybody, I have a great suspense novel that I wrote years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, I would love to have this put out there. It's a suspense thriller. And I literally just heard from my agent, oh God, Don't send me a suspense thriller right now. We're not doing those right now. So that's how the market moves. And you have to have something else to send them so that you can still stay viable. And he actually said to me, send me something that's lighthearted, like nothing entertainment. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I don't really write that, but okay. And, sure enough, I sat down and I was like, okay, I can do that. I can give you more lighthearted, and that's what you do as an author. It's a job and there's a marketplace. And I think you have to be able to adapt, but also, not get discouraged by somebody saying no to a book. I mean, like I said, In an Instant was a book I'd shoved away. I thought it was a good book. My editor at the time did not. And now it is, it's the biggest book I've ever written,
I guess that, like you said, you never know. So one thing, if you had to say what you would like people to feel when they finish reading a book written by Suzanne Redfearn, what is it that you hope that they feel when they close the book after they read the last page of one of your books?
Yeah, so it's very interesting that you asked that, because I think the thing that probably differentiates me and also makes my life a little bit brutal is I don't write with a plot. I write from a theme. So my first book was this idea of marital sabotage and the evil and good in each of us and how you switch that on its head based on circumstances. That's not a plot. That's just this abstract idea of how one husband can sabotage a wife and how they can go vice versa and that kind of thing. My second one was celebrity and what it does and the damage it does to the person and collateral damage. Every one of my books comes from this kind of underlying theme rather than, oh, I'm going to have, kid disappear and then they're going to chase after him, blah, 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 blah. The only one that isn't like that is Hadley and Grace, because it did kind of follow the Thelma and Louise theme. But so I think the answer to your question is, at the end, you should have the question. You should know what the question was, kind of, even if it's just intuitively, like, whoa, what would I have done in those circumstances, or how would I have handled that? And hopefully there's ambiguity when you're finished, that I've presented it in such a way that you actually don't know the answer. That's what I want. I want you to walk away going, ooh, would I have done that? Oh, I might have done that. Ooh, do I really blame them for that? I'm not sure. I want you to walk away with all those questions, because that's what the story was about.
Okay, so if people are looking for a book that resonates with them when they're done, they should buy your books. Is that?
Yeah, that's going to torture them when they're finished.
People find your books, Suzanne?
How did they find them?
Where can they buy?
Just about everywhere. I mean, I'm on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, iBooks. Yeah, if you can find them, pretty much. Okay. Not some of the independent stores do not carry Amazon imprints, just because there's an Amazon rub there. So if you're going to your local bookshop, you might have a rough time. My local bookshop's wonderful, Laguna Beach Books, they carry it. But any of the bigger chains will carry the book.
Okay, all right, and we'll put links to your books in the show notes as well. Okay. So I so much wish you the best of luck with Hadley, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Good luck to all you writers out there.
Okay, and I want to thank everybody who joined us this morning. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. Or you can go to the SCWA Facebook page or YouTube and see other videos like this. So until next week, have a great week. Next week, we will be bringing another Laguna Beach, Newport writer, Kara Ruda. So we will see you all next week, next Wednesday. Stay safe. Bye.